In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you the basics of Photomatix. Photomatix has a lot of settings and sliders and different ways you can manipulate an image. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to stick with just the basics. Now, most of the settings that I'm going to show you are ones that I actually use. The ones that we're not going to go over, I rarely ever use. So the first step is to click Load Bracketed Photos. I'm going to click Browse. I'm going to go to the three bracketed shots I have on my desktop here. The first one, as you can see, is a normal exposure. The second one is an underexposure. And the third one is an overexposure. So I'm going to select these three images, and I'm going to click Load, and then I'm going to click OK. Now, this brings up a dialog box called Processing Options. Many of these options we won't use. A few of them I use from time to time. For instance, the first one here, Aligning Source Images. I would use this if I were not able to use a tripod while I was taking my three exposures. This rarely ever happens, and so I rarely have to use this option. But when I do, it basically will take misaligned images and align them for you. The second option that I use from time to time is the reduced noise option. Again, I use a tripod most of the time, and so I'm able to keep my ISO very low. When you take bracketed shots where the ISO is high, you run the risk of creating a lot of noise in the images. So this step here helps reduce the noise in the images. But again, I rarely ever use this option. So for now, I'm just going to click Reprocess. It's going to turn through the three images that we uploaded, and it's going to take the darkest of the dark part of the image and the lightest of the light part of the image, and it's going to create an HDR image with lots of color. So you can see here, this is the image, and these are our sliders. So what we'll do here is adjust these sliders in order to adjust the image itself. You'll see the first option here is called Strength. This basically controls the strength of our HDR image, how much HDR to put into it. Generally, I like to use 100%, so I'm going to make it 100%. Color saturation will change how much color is actually in the image, all the way from black and white to a little bit of color, and then all the way up to as much color as we can possibly get. Again, I like to use 100% here. Luminosity, again, I usually try to keep this setting between 4 and 5, but you'll see what happens if I ratchet this down, it becomes very dark. The reason I want this setting up high like this is because later I'm going to pull this image into Photoshop, and I'm going to do some more post-processing there. And when I do that, it generally makes the image darker. So you want to start with one that's slightly overexposed. The next one is Detail Contrast. You can adjust how much contrast you want in the image. I like to keep mine up around 5, 6 even sometimes. I'll leave it there for now. And then lighting adjustment. Again, I like to keep mine up around 5 or 6. So after you've made adjustments to your sliders and gotten the image exactly how you want it, you're going to click Process. So Photomatix is now going to take those settings and it's going to create our final HDR image. Once it's finished creating the HDR image, we're going to actually save it to our desktop. This is what the final image looks like. And what you would do now is, you can't see it on screen, but you would go up to File, Save As. I'm going to name this Colorado. I'm going to keep it as a TIFF file and save. So that's all there is to it. We now have our HDR image, and it's time to now pull it into Photoshop. So in the book, go ahead to the next chapter, read up on how to use Photoshop, and then there's another video tutorial there. I'll see you in Chapter 5.